Today is chapter 3, section 3, on page 213 of Derech Hashem, The Way of God. And if you get an opportunity, purchase the book. We're about halfway through the book. Well, we're actually a little bit more than halfway through the book. We're actually about almost a third left. So we'll knock this out as quick as we possibly can because there are so many exciting new topics that we want to try to venture into. Now, today we're going to be talking about inspiration and prophecy. More than likely, this would be more than a one part. It's going to be probably multiple parts to this section because part of teaching about what inspiration and prophecy is to the non-Jewish world, we have to talk about what prophecy is not. Because we come into this with so many ideas. The B'nai Noach, the Ger comes in to, leaves their Christianity and they have very strong ideas of what they think a prophet is. And in reality, what 21st century modern day quote-unquote Christian prophets that exist out there look nothing like what a prophet is actually supposed to be. Now, with that being said, do we know, or do you happen to know, how many Gentile prophets are found in the Tanakh? Do we know? Anybody know? And it's interesting. There's more than one. It's a good hint. Interesting enough, it's 7. Why is that interesting? Because there are 70 nations. So the idea is there's a prophet supposed to be for every nation. And the reason why, according to the sages of blessed memory, that prophets were given to the nations is that they would not be with an excuse to say, well, you didn't give us a prophet like Moshe. If you'd have given us a prophet, we would have had a chance to live a righteous life and do the right thing. And these prophets, among these prophets are Balaam, we all pretty much know that guy, Beor, Job, Eliphaz, Bildad, Zephyr, and Elihu, and the last one, Berechoel. And some of these are names that you've probably never even heard of. There are 7 Gentile prophecies. Now, normally prophecy is only granted to individuals of total Israeli lineage. Now, we pretty much know that is a general given. There's a whole list of the prophets. If you want to go look in Judaism 101, you can see all the lists of the prophets and where they prophesy. They must be direct descendants of Abraham as God told him, I will be a God to you and to your descendants after you, Genesis 17:7. Moses said, God, your Lord, will elevate a prophet from you, from your brothers, just like me, Deuteronomy 18:15. That is a total of Israelite ancestry, just like Moses. Now, one would say, are the prophets that appeared after Moshe, were they like Moshe, literally? Or was Moshe's prophecy like their prophecy? Well, it's very clear that Moshe's prophecy was quite a bit different than their prophecy because he was at such a high level. What he brought down from Hashem was at other levels. Now, we're going to try to break down during these next few days what that is. Now, when I was a Christian and I would go see some famous Christian prophet, per se, I found them silly, flamboyant, nothing what I expected a sober-minded prophet should be. Most of the time they stood in front of congregations promising blessings and prosperity, healing, and everything Americans want. More. There's no mention of repentance and tshuva. There's no mention of returning back to the commandments of God and to follow in the footsteps of holiness and righteousness. And with that all being said, the 21st century Christian idea of a prophet leaves a lot to be desired. Now, there are some within Christianity, I must say and defend, who say that true prophecy does not exist today as it did before. That would fall in line with Jewish ideas that prophecy does not exist as it existed before. Now, why did prophecy leave? What was the reason why prophecy left? Do we know? Miss Betty, do you know? You're so smart with everything. Why did prophecy leave?
You know that that's one of the things that I think I used to know.
Right. Okay, well, good. We'll examine that for a second. Why did prophecy leave? Well, with the destruction of the temple, after they had come back out of exile and built the temple, and then all of a sudden, when the last temple was built, there was such a horrible time of political corruption that was going on, and Hashem seemed to have just lifted prophecy right out of Israel itself. Now, the next question would be begged to ask, and I don't know the answer, but would prophecy still exist in the modern era in the nations? Is there goyim that are prophets? I don't know. I think once we hear what the true test of a prophet is, I think you would quickly determine probably not. Once you know what a true prophet is. In the first paragraph on page 213, it says, God ordained that man should naturally be able to teach himself, understand, and reason with his intellect, and thus gain knowledge from his observation of things and their properties. For this first paragraph is talking about that every human being has the ability to logically work through a process and come to a good decision. It's using gray matter. I often remember people asking me, well, what do you think God wants me to do? And I'll tell them, He gave you gray matter, and He gave you the Torah. You're responsible for making a good decision. That's all it is to it. You don't need a prophet to tell you what to do. As a matter of fact, someone who needs a prophet to tell them what to do is someone who's trying to skirt around personal responsibility. Now, with that being said, there exists another means of gaining knowledge that is much higher than this. And what we talk much higher than this in our capability of reasoning, et cetera, there is another level that's higher. And that is, this is what we call bestowed enlightenment or divine inspiration. Bestowed enlightenment. Now, bestowed enlightenment consists of an influence granted by God through various particular means, especially prepared for this purpose. When this influence reaches an individual's mind, certain information becomes fixed in it. He perceives this knowledge clearly, without a doubt or error, and knows it completely with all its propositions and all of its corollaries, as well as its place in general scheme. This is called divine inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh. With that follow through, we have to understand that there is a method to the madness that God has for the prophet in the world. Growing up, as I've said, as a Christian, and now that I'm away from that and understand what true prophecy is, I realized how almost insane the 21st century, quote, Christian prophets have been. The claims that they make. The projections that they predict, all of the reasons why the world's going to come to end by a certain date. I mean, we could go through and list a whole myriad of things here. All of them not coming true. What is one of the first tests that we're going to find of a prophet is what they see and what they hear is clear and concise without any variances. Now, the prophets of old, when they spoke, it's interesting, when they spoke and they wrote down in the Tanakh and the Nevi'im and the prophets some of these great visions, it was hard for people of that era to even understand what they're writing about. And here in the postmodern era, we look at these same texts and go, now this makes sense. Now we understand about the destruction that's going to go on in what's happening right now, for example, in Syria. Almost word for word what the prophet said was going to happen before the day of Mashiach. It's happening. 20 years ago, you would have gone, nah, no way. It's too stable. Too much of a stable environment. And look at what's happening. Bestowed enlightenment consists of an influence granted by God through various particular means, especially prepared for this purpose. With this influence reaches an individual's mind. Okay, we said that. Let's go on. paragraph 2. In this manner, one can gain knowledge of the things otherwise accessible to human reason, but in a much deeper way, as discussed above. On the other hand, one can also gain information that could be otherwise gained through natural means. This includes such things and information concerning future events and hidden secrets. A prophet is therefore accepted because of his qualifications and messages, and not because of ancestry. So we know this. Why do we know this? We know that there are plenty of prophets who were not Jewish. As a matter of fact, Obadiah, one of the last prophets that spoke, was not a Jew, was a ger, and a convert, they say. But the point is God bestows upon whom he desires to bestow great knowledge on. But when he does, it's very clear and concise. God said to Moses, I will rise up a prophet from just like you. This indicates that to be worthy as a prophet, a person must be perfect like Moses, above and beyond the 10 steps leading to divine inspiration. Why do we say this? Because a person who's a prophet has to be a person of the highest, purest motivation. That person also has to be a person that is not given to mental illness. Why is that important? Because a person that has mental illnesses can have a difficulty differentiating between what is prophecy and what is divine inspiration and what is their own thoughts. And it's nothing against a person with mental illness. It's just that it's a fact. And it's a fact that shows that when you look at Moshe himself, was a man of strong moral turpitude. It is taught that the prophet must be intelligent, wealthy, and strong. This refers to his psychological rather than physical traits. A prophet must be a perfect mental health with his intellect above as perfectly as possible for a human being. Besides this, he must also be expert in all areas of Torah. He must have the wealth of spirit with no desire of additional wealth or gain. Likewise, he must have the strength and character for his passions well balanced and all of his desires aimed at God. I read a most ridiculous story today of a bishop in the Christian movement in, I think it's Africa, that lays hands on people, especially men, for sexual desire to be aroused. And I won't go into the sordid details as to where he lays his hands, but you can imagine. This is not a prophet. This is someone who is a false prophet. He claims to have these great gifts of prophecy and healing, and these things he does. So we go on. It says, this experience, however, can take place on many different levels. These may involve, this is paragraph 3, these may involve the power of influence, the time when it is granted, the manner in which it reaches the individual, the nature of the things revealed and communicated in this fashion. In case, however, the influence comes in such a manner that its recipient is clearly aware of it. So, a prophet doesn't guess. A prophet knows. I don't even know what that looks like, okay? I honestly don't. I mean, I'm going to tell you, we're going to discuss this, but I don't know of any prophets in this room to include myself, okay? However, if I'm privy to some information that is true and factual and clear, I can give that out and that information out with clarity. And there's no doubt from the listener when they hear that information, go, wow, he must have done his research, he must have done his homework. And then you could go verify that. A prophet who speaks, if he speaks anything other than what the Torah recommends for humanity, is not a true prophet. Moshe says that if a prophet comes to you showing signs, miracles, and wonders, and he says, come out to the desert and I'll show you God, if he's not teaching you the Torah, then he's not a prophet. If he's not calling you to tshuva, he's not a prophet. It is also possible, however, that such influence be extended to a person's mind so that he can clearly perceive a given concept without being aware of its influence. In such a case, it is an experience like any other idea that arises spontaneously in one mind. So a prophet could potentially receive Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, and not know where it comes from. Now, I would think that many people who are very spiritually minded, who are attuned to Torah, who walk righteously before Hashem, have those inspirational moments in which divine inspiration sort of triggers something. You don't know where it comes from, but obviously you know, wow, this was like This was like a download, right? This is something I should pay attention to this. Often that happens for us as individuals. It's not for us to go out and stand on a street corner and prophesy the end of the world coming. It's mostly about ourselves. It's, for example, when we do Hitzpah, personal prayer. When we spend time on personal prayer and all of a sudden something just pops in your head and you realize, oh, I need to take care of this. Or, oh, I need to pray for this. That's divine inspiration. This is what we're talking about. In a broader sense, it is also called divine inspiration or hidden influence. In the words of our sages of blessed memory, even though there's actually much lower level, true divine inspiration, however, is a clear and vivid experience to the one worthy of it, and he is highly aware of its influence. Now, what do we say? The person who has divine inspiration, whether he be a great prophet or one who experiences some level of divine inspiration, maybe hearing the Torah taught, or you're listening to a great lecture, and all of a sudden something just pops in your mind, and you know, wow, you just received some insight you didn't have. That could be divine inspiration because you're not aware of where it comes from. And that, I think, is the reason why the true Torah student, a Talmidah, is not going to be puffed up by their knowledge because they realize that their knowledge doesn't come because they're so smart. It comes because of a blessing from Hashem to those who study the Torah. There is a meditative state that a prophet goes into that I would also say that the average Jew and righteous non-Jew can go into. And a person who attains these qualities is then ready to prepare himself for prophecy or divine inspiration. He or she must focus his entire being toward God and engage in meditation. Now, this meditation we're talking about, and we all know, we're very familiar, I just mentioned, is Hitzpah. Using methods known to the prophets, it is only a deep meditative state that he or she can be worthy of a vision at the time of prophecy. He is thus on total new spiritual level. Let me ask you, does a prophet only need to be a man? No, of course not. So there are women prophets out there as well, which helps us to understand that the Spirit of God is not a respecter of male or female or humanity. He will bring His spirit of prophecy upon even a non-Jew who is tuned to Him, like the great prophet Job. An individual seeking prophecy must be careful to keep his motives or her motives absolutely pure. The preparations for prophecies are extremely rigorous, and without divine help, they can lead to psychological and false visions rather than true prophecy. Do you get that? There are people out there who are not connected to Torah and not truly connected to the righteousness of Torah, who seek the spirit of prophecy, and it ends up being the spirit of divination, right? It's dark magics that they can get involved in, and they don't even realize that they're involved in such craziness. Moreover, it says that a neophyte prophet who has not yet learned to master his gift can easily misunderstand his revelations. Section 4, or paragraph 4, page 215. There's another level, however, that is much higher than such divine inspiration. So now we're going to talk about a next level. This level of true prophecy is a degree of inspiration where the individual reaches a level where he literally blinds himself to God in such a way that he can actually feel this attachment. Now, what does it mean to be blinded to God? Binds to God. How does it mean to be binded to God? It's clinging. You're clinging at such a high level that everything around you disappears. Everything around you has no effect on you at all. So he binds himself to God in such a way that he can feel this attachment. He then clearly realizes that the one to whom he is bound is God in a manner that will be discussed shortly. This is sensed with entire clarity and with an awareness that leaves no room for doubt whatsoever. The individual is as sure of it as he would be if there was a physical object observed with its physical sense. Here is a prime example, and we remember Abraham Avinu, who had 3 angels appear to him. It was so real to him, he thought and said they were what? They were men. Now we do know, according to the Ramchal, that angels can appear to be like men, right? We know that. And they can eat, they can do everything, function just like a man. But he has such an, think about the attachment that Abraham had with Hashem. Abraham comes to visit him on the third day of his circumcision. Think about the beauty of that the creator of the universe would come to visit you on the third day, and while you're there, he's so connected to Hashem, he's able to see the angelic host that God sends him. Just incredible. A prophet's first experience may be so negligible that he might not even recognize it as prophecy. Let's talk about visions of angels, because this is what we're talking about. Having such a connection and binding themselves to the Creator that he or she can see angelic beings and not even realize they're angels. This is Abraham. The prophecy may consist of a voice indistinguishable from a human speech. In the case of Samuel, you remember Samuel? It has been very much like bat kol. A prophet may also begin his career by seeing an angel in the case of Moshe. Moshe goes to the burning bush. Did he know what he was seeing at first? Had no idea, did he? Actually, he was walking over to it, and the voice spoke from the bush, the voice of a man, the voice of God, whatever. It says, take your shoes off, you're on holy ground. He had no idea what he was seeing. Think of, well, we'll come to Samuel in just a moment. A prophet may also begin his career by seeing an angel like Moses. Although an angel is an incorporeal spiritual being there with no shape or form, God can cause a person to see an angel in a vision. It is thus written, God opened Balaam's eyes and he saw an angel. Numbers 22:31. God often uses the vision of an angel to prepare a person for prophecy. It's to sort of wake him up. Yes?
Would this be like Jacob, that we just learned about in the last portion?
Precisely.
Although he was asleep.
Right. He saw a vision in his sleep, right?
When he woke up, he said, Hashem is in this place and I didn't realize.
That is precisely it. Yaakov is laying and sleeping and has a vision of angels going up and down the ladder. And that vision helped him to realize this is truly the place of the Creator. This is the place that we need to set up and bless as a Beit HaMikdash in the future. You're absolutely right. Prophecy itself is often channeled through an angel. A prophet would thus make such a statement as, I am a prophet like you, and the angel spoke to me in 1 Kings 13:18. Just as there are many levels of intelligence, there are many degrees of prophecy. Now, we talked about another level of higher prophecy. The main concept of true prophecy, this is a second section of paragraph 4, page 215. Says the main concept of true prophecy is therefore that the living person achieves such an attachment and bond with God. This in itself is certainly a very high degree of perfection. Besides this, however, it is often accompanied by certain information and enlightenment. Through prophecy, one can gain knowledge of many lofty truths among God's hidden mysteries. These things are perceived very clearly, just like all knowledge gained through bestowed enlightenment and discussed above. Prophecy, however, comes with such greater force than divine inspiration, and we shall explain this shortly. So what he's saying is that prophecy can come at other higher levels that are much greater than divine inspiration. It's not just a passing thought in your mind that you're not sure where it comes from. It's an angel of the Lord that stands before you. It speaks words of divine information that you would not know otherwise. Prophecy can occur not only through angels, but it can occur through visions. Or in a prophetic dream, as we just mentioned. A vision gained while the prophet is awake is a higher degree of prophecy. Who do we know received information and downloads from the Creator when they were awake? Who's the first person that comes to mind? Moses. Face to face, right? Panim apanim, right? Face to face. He saw face to face. Now, the idea is whether he saw God face to face. Whatever he saw, he knew very clearly that this was an amazing level. Angels speak as is higher than being given a message through a vision of a human. The highest level of prophecy is hearing a voice and knowing that it's directly from God. I've heard people who have, from all different religious walks, hear a voice that speaks to them that changes their life forever. We can only attribute, if it changes their life for good, attribute it to some divine intervention. The problem is most people attribute that divine intervention to their particular deity, whether it be Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever you can think of. Christianity, for example. I asked an individual here a few years ago, a dear friend of mine who is a Christian pastor, who I have tremendous amount of respect for, but he said that he had a vision while driving in a truck when he was on drugs and alcohol abuse, etc. And he had a vision of what he said was Jesus appeared to him. And he said, told him that, you have to get your life straight. If not, this is your last chance. And so as we were driving down the road, I was listening to the story. It was very, very convincing. I mean, he was very serious that this happened to him. As a matter of fact, he completely stopped his drugs and alcohol, changed his life, began to pursue a life of giving to others, and eventually at some point became a pastor of a church and has been very successful. And I asked him, how do you know that it was Jesus? And he said, I assume that it was. I said, did he actually tell you he was Jesus? And he said, no. So I said, is it possible that it was an angel of the Lord? Yes. So why do you still consider it to be Jesus? He said, I just can't help, because the vision was so powerful. How could I have changed my life in such a way if it wasn't? And he has to deal with what he has to deal with. But what we're saying is very clearly, when an angel of the Lord appears to you, you know what it is. I have no doubt that he saw some apparition of something from divine inspiration that caused him to change his life. I have no doubt about that. And it happens to all religions. It happens in Islamic religions. People claim all the time to see angels and deities come to, or angels and Jesus or Muhammad or whomever appears to them and gives them some great insight. There's another level that's even deeper. You ready to go for this? Do we have time to go for another level? Okay. This is called subquantum levels. Woo! Okay. The human brain is like a receiving mechanism which the soul can act. This action, however, usually occurs in the sublets or subquantum levels, and it is marked by the mind's normal revealing mechanism and reaction to external stimuli. When a person's mind is completely relaxed, as during sleep, the effects of the soul can sometimes be detected. On rare occasions, these effects may be manifest in normal dreams. So let's take just a moment to examine this. We've all had like lucid dreaming. Are you familiar with lucid dreaming? How many has ever had a lucid dream where you're asleep but very conscious, and then you have something happens and it just seems so real that it's like you feel like that you just experienced it? That's sort of a lucid dreaming. You're sort of halfway in between. And that's why it's very important, and I tell people, if you have a problem with studying Torah and comprehending, go to sleep with it playing in your ears. Because there's a sub-quantum level that you begin to have Torah imparted into your soul, into your mind. And it's a very powerful thing, and it works. Trust me, it works. I've done it for the longest time, and it works. I can't even explain. With that being said, there are levels in which a person can receive these things, and it's hard for us to understand, but science is beginning to sort of pilfer through some of these concepts. There is the pineal gland, which, are you familiar, is what they call the God gland, and that when stimulated creates hallucinogenic responses. There is a drug that they have tried. I'm trying to think what it is. I just saw the research on it. There's a hallucinogenic drug, and I'll think of it. I think it might be ecstasy. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on it. But a doctor wanted to help cancer patients who felt that their cancer had become not only a physical defect, but a psychological defect, to such a point that they're dying in their minds. Does that make sense? It's like they cannot break through the fact that they have cancer and this is going to kill them, right? And they're depressed and they're full of anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. So he did a test with, I think it's ecstasy, but it's an hallucinogenic drug in a controlled environment, medical environment, in which people are given this dose one time. And they have such an intense spiritual experience, they come out of it completely changed forever. They come out of it happy, full of joy, a new purpose in life, a new focus in life. So science somehow has been able to tap into the mechanics of the brain to figure these things out. And I think the more we go along, we're going to find out that science is going to discover things that we've already known throughout the teaching of the Zohar, from Kabbalah, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to find out that they're just going to discover stuff that we've already known was out there, but maybe didn't have a scientific explanation. Dreams are therefore spoken of as a touch of prophecy. The difference between a dream and a prophetic vision is quantitative rather than qualitative. Most dreams, however, do not contain true information. What do I mean by that? You can have a dream that seems prophetic, but you can't put the pieces together and it really doesn't make sense. That's not a prophetic dream. You just had a dream that had some information in it. Did we finish section 5 yet? We're in paragraph 5. No, I don't think so. Let's finish paragraph 5 before we go on. These intermediaries, this is the second section of paragraph 5 on page 217. These intermediaries then act as lenses through which one sees the glory. What a prophet actually perceives, however, is the glory itself and not something else. The way one sees it, however, depends on the particular intermediary involved, just as what one would see through a lens would depend on the particular type of lens. There and therefore many degrees of perception depending on the lens involved. It may cause the subject to appear far away or very close. There can be, furthermore, various degrees of transparency and opaqueness in the lens itself. Oh my goodness, what is he talking about? What the Ramchal is saying is that an individual that has developed prophecy uses many different mechanisms. Many different mechanisms. It can be things that are physical. There are things in which his highest level of his brain has been developed. And later on, we're going to learn that there are a school of prophets. Do you remember that? Remember the school of prophets? It's nothing like what we see today in Christianity. But the school of prophets was a young man who had been raised up and seemed to have a particular gift. And a prophet would be assigned to a prophet, and he would be, quote, a son of a prophet. He'd be a son of a prophet. And the one primary one is Elijah and Elisha, right? We see that relationship. And they are trained over a particular period of time in which they develop their abilities to decipher. The prime example, and we'll discuss this in a later lesson, is when Samuel is put in the temple. You remember he's a little boy, right? And he hears the voice of God. And he doesn't know what it is. There's no clue. He's a young boy. And so he gets up and he asks Eli, Did you say something to me? And remember, Samuel was living in the Beis Hamikdash. He was living at the temple where the priests were at. And he says, no, son, I didn't speak to you. So how many times did that happen? 3 times. Last time Samuel had not heard the voice of God himself, so he didn't know, according to the sages blessed. Remember, he hadn't even heard the voice of God like that. Eli had not even heard the voice of the prophet like that, a voice of God. So he goes back, and Samuel lays down and hears the voice. And he told him, when you hear the voice, tell him, here am I. And he said that. And of course, Hashem spoke to him. So now we're understanding that the school of prophets, we understand that there are levels of prophecy, and understanding that there are many different mechanisms or lens which a prophet examines things and sees things, and each one of them have these particular talents and skills that can be taught to them. One day prophecy will return. We do believe that, and that will happen in the Messianic era. And it will be in such an amazing era. They say that first it will manifest itself in children, that the children will be the first ones because they're the purest soul. So in recap, yes, sir?
It doesn't say in the Torah that Elijah will come first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Elijah and Malachi, they will come and they will sort of usher in the Messianic era along with prophecy that will come. So let's do a recap. We're going to pick up on paragraph 6 on 217 of the Way of God. Now, let's do a recap. So we understand that non-Jews can be prophets, and there were 7 that we listed. A prophet does not necessarily have to be a descendant, an Israelite or Jew. It doesn't have to be a man. It can be a woman or a man. A prophet, on its basic level, a person, just about any really true righteous person focused to God, can receive some level of divine information, but a prophet is at another different level. Yes, they receive divine information, but their mechanisms in which they receive are due to them clinging to Hashem and living at the highest level of integrity, purity of heart and mind. And their clinging to Hashem allows them to be able to peer into the other side, allows them to see what other people can't see. Number 1, angels. And next is the subquantum levels of the brain in which they perceive these, what seems to be hallucinogenic things, but are very clearly something very real. And let me use this as the last example. You remember when Elijah is taken away. What does the description describe? What is the description there? It's like wild, isn't it? It's like a wheel inside of a wheel. It's an angel with the face of an eagle and the face of a bear, and oh my goodness, it's like totally, just absolutely hallucinogenic. One day we're going to understand what that is. One day we're going to comprehend it. Now, there is commentaries available that help describe some of those things. But clearly what was seen by Elisha and recorded, that's what he saw. Which meant that Elisha was already connected at that highest level to be able to see that. The question is would anybody else on the ground have seen that? I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have seen that at all. Maybe he just saw Elijah just cross over into the other dimension. And what he saw in the other dimension carrying him away was the chariot of the Creator. So, okay, that concludes this year, and we'll go to any questions, fears, doubts, unbeliefs.